Good evening, the name's Bond, Captain Goodspeed Bond, and welcome to another video. Today marks the end of an era. It is the end of the Eon era of James Bond, as Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson have announced they are stepping down from the creative elements of making James Bond films, and they've handed them over to Amazon executives who, of course, bought the MGM Studios company, which encompasses Eon Productions, back in 2022. So it is very much the end of an era, the end of sort of phase two of the Bond films, if you like. You had the Cubby Broccoli era all the way up to 1989, and then we've had the Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson since 1995 with GoldenEye over the last 30 years. And now we're moving into Amazon Bond, and, well, we will see how it goes. I will be giving sort of my thoughts and reaction to that throughout this video. Obviously, please let me know your opinions on it down in the comment section below. It's, I think, been shockwaves throughout the Bond community. Sort of came completely out of the blue. I certainly don't think we were expecting this news, and certainly not this quickly. You know, people thought maybe Michael G. Wilson would be retiring very, very soon due to his age, but I don't think people seriously thought that they would completely let Amazon loose on the reins of the creative elements of Bond. But I thought we'd take a little bit of time just to read the article BBC have put together. This is how I found out mid-afternoon today. James Bond's long-serving producers give control to Amazon. So the James Bond film franchise will no longer be controlled by the Broccoli dynasty after long-serving masterminds Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson announced they are stepping down. The Bond films were launched by Albert Cubby Broccoli in 1962 before his daughter and stepson took over. The pair will now give creative control to Amazon MGM Studios, which is formed when Amazon bought Bond's parent studio in 2022. The new deal comes after mounting speculation about the fate of the British spy 4 years after his last outing in No Time to Die, which was also Daniel Craig's final appearance in the role. It almost makes him sound like a real person, doesn't it? We don't know what the fate of him was. Obviously we do. More on that on another day. Amazon will now decide which actor will take over the famous character, but there is still no timescale for when that will happen, or when the next film will be made. James Norton, Aaron Taylor-Johnson and Theo James are among the bookmakers' favourites to fill Craig's shoes. After Thursday's announcement, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos canvassed fans' opinion on social media, asking, "Who do you pick as the next Bond?" Interesting. A statement said Broccoli and Wilson will remain co-owners of the franchise as part of a new joint venture, but Amazon MGM Studios will gain creative control. Wilson, 83, said, with my 007's career spanning nearly 60 incredible years, I'm stepping back from producing the James Bond films to focus on art and charitable projects. Therefore, Barbara and I agree it's time for our trusted partner, Amazon MGM Studios, to lead James Bond into the future. Broccoli added, my life has been dedicated to maintaining and building upon the extraordinary legacy that was handed to Michael and me by our father, producer Cubby Broccoli. I've had the honour of working closely with four of the tremendously talented actors who've played 007 and thousands of wonderful artists within the industry. With the conclusion of No Time to Die and Michael retiring from the films, I feel it is time to focus on my other projects. The Daniel Craig Macbeth production. Just saying. Look at that. She is clinging on to him for dear life. She loves Daniel Craig. Cubby Broccoli launched the iconic franchise with co-producer Saltzman and was joined by Wilson as a producing partner for 1985's A View to a Kill. Barbara took over from Cubby to join Wilson as a producer for GoldenEye, and the pair have overseen every Bond film since. They kept tight control of the character, something that was acknowledged by Craig when he presented them with honorary Oscars in November. Over the years, as many people and organisations have tried to put their own footprint on Bond. Barbara Michael, I can't tell you how much I admire your integrity in holding on to your singular vision as you brought Bond into the 21st century with a passionate and protective determination to honour the heart of this franchise. Okay, and then, a load of speculation about what might happen in the future, which is what the rest of this video is about, I guess. But I guess we have to take the moment to respect Barbara and Michael's decision, and we have to thank them for their incredible work over the last 30 years to keep this franchise going. I think a lot of people after 1989 and License to Kill thought that was the end for Bond, and they brought it back with a bang with GoldenEye. They showed that Bond can survive in the modern era after the Cold War, and there's still a place for Bond in modern society. And like it or loathe it, the Daniel Craig films were very successful, certainly at the box office. Fans are perhaps divided on Daniel Craig, particularly how that era ended, but they were very successful at the box office, and I think a lot of people, casual Bond fans, do think that Daniel Craig is the best Bond, and that, I guess, comes down to the vision that Barbara and Michael had for the character and what they wanted to do with it, and it was successful, and it made a lot of money, and it made Bond relevant again, I guess. But, ultimately, you have to say it's a huge, huge shift now that it has been handed over to Amazon, who, only a few weeks ago, were apparently branding the Bond franchise as content, and Barbara Broccoli allegedly fell out with them, used certain expletives to describe Amazon and their executives, and that's maybe got my mind going of, is this a case of Barbara and Michael have been pushed almost, and Amazon are certainly the holders of the money, the holders of the key to making a new James Bond film, new James Bond content, if you want to call it that. And maybe they were just saying, right, okay, we're not going to do that unless you two leave. And we'll give you the opportunity to leave gracefully, step down, and we will take over. And we need your blessing to do it, essentially. Otherwise, there won't be any more James Bond content because we want to have it as our way and not your way. Potentially, that is something that's happened. Obviously, that is just speculation. But where does that leave us going forward? Whatever's happened in the past, we now have to, I guess, embrace Amazon and support them, give them the benefit of the doubt. I think a lot of people are very skeptical about Amazon taking over and are very worried about what's happened to other franchises like Marvel or like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. Will it essentially become a content farm? And I've got to say, I'm not that familiar with how Amazon operates. Disney very much have milked Star Wars. Some of the stuff has been excellent that they've produced. Some of the stuff has been awful. But I think ultimately they rushed into making the sequel trilogy, and it was not as good as it could have been, and maybe tarnished the legacy. Now, I don't think you can necessarily do that with Bond because of how it's ended. No Time to Die, of course, ended with James Bond dying, and essentially they've got a clean slate. And certainly with Disney, with Star Wars, where they've had clean slates with Mandalorian perhaps, or Rogue One, I know it sort of was fitted into the story, but it wasn't a continuation of a story. They had clean slates with those, and it worked very, very well. Mandalorian is very popular for Star Wars. I think for James Bond, a new era could be very popular if it's seen as very much separate from the previous eras, which it will be, because presumably they're not going to continue it on from Die Another Day as much as I'd love them to, and have that original continuity of James Bond, who married Tracy, and where Felix Leiter had his leg bitten off, and all of that. And obviously they can't continue the Craig era because he's dead, unless they could take a complete U-turn and really change the end of that film, and Q actually does find a cure for nanobots or some way to stop them, and James Bond is actually invincible and survived the bombardment at the end of No Time to Die. That could happen. I don't see it. I think a fresh start is going to help them. Certainly with things like Fallout, Jack Ryan, Reacher, I think Amazon have been very successful with. And actually, the one Bond thing that they made, 007 Road to a Million, I actually really enjoyed. It obviously could have lent on the Bond a hell of a lot more than it did, but I enjoyed it. It was well made, high production value, certainly. And I think that's what we can come to expect from it. James Bond is an entity. It is an institution, certainly in Britain. And I think across the world as well. Bond is one of the most recognisable characters, and it's got probably the most recognisable theme song. Amazon have a lot of potential here, and I think they will realise that. If you think back 25 years ago, the merchandise for Bond, the sort of Bond feeling, there was Bond video games, all of that was booming. Bond was making a lot of money. You had Pierce Brosnan, who just emanates James Bond as he walks around. If you can recapture that for a modern audience, I think it could be a huge success for Amazon. And I think it will, hopefully, be that. I've got to be hopeful about it. And I'm very much looking at it as a way of, well, at least something is happening now, because we've gone through 4 years of next to no news at all of whether there will even be another film. The only thing that has sort of kept everybody going is the 4 words at the end of the No Time to Die credits: James Bond will return. So we assume he will return at some point, or the plan was for him to return at some point. No news at all. Barbara Broccoli obviously very much focusing on this Macbeth production for Daniel Craig, rightly or wrongly, means that we've sort of been in the dark as Bond fans. Something is going to happen now. That's why there's been this announcement. Amazon are now going to lead the charge on that. Now, is it reasonable to expect a Bond film every 2 years or even every year like it was back in the day? I don't think it is anymore. And I suppose you don't want to saturate the market. Unless they went for a sort of period drama, completely faithful adaptations of the books. That could be something that they do and knock out very, very quickly. I don't really like that. I love how Bond has sort of become a time capsule of those different periods of time. And I think it should continue to do that. Sort of, jet setting across the globe, and it still needs to have those elements of fast cars, fancy gadgets, nice suits, lovely women. All of that has got to stay in the sort of Bond universe. What I really hope doesn't happen is that they feel like they have to tick equality boxes, if you like, and sort of force things to happen. If things happen organically and naturally, I think that's absolutely fine. What you don't want to do is force things to happen. I think Doctor Who has found that recently. Obviously, that's very much rumoured to possibly be facing the axe. I think when you're forcing things into a franchise, it can feel forced and doesn't flow nicely. So they've got to be careful. They've got to try and, I think certainly initially, feed off what made James Bond successful. You've got to sit back and look at 25 films and go, what went well? What could be better? And focus on those what went wells. Then focus on incremental improvement once you've got the buy-in of the fans, and in particular the casual fans. They're your stakeholders. You need casual fans to go and see Bond at the cinema. It's not ultimately the hardcore Bond fans like me that are going to ensure that Bond survives going forward. They need to make a damn good product for people to buy into. And I guess, you know, looking forward, I've got to be excited about that. We finally got news, I guess, of James Bond movement, and we've got to now get behind them. We thank Barbara, we thank Michael, we thank Cubby, of course, for incredible work for 62 years and 25 films. But it is now time to move on. We can't change anything now that has happened in the past. We can't change the fact that Amazon have taken over creative rights, and we've just got to embrace whatever it is, whether it's a Felix Leiter mini-series or whether it's a Halle Berry Jinx series, or Jinx film, or a James Bond origin story, or a Moneypenny Diaries, all of that. We've got to embrace it and enjoy the Bond content and think about the times where we've had nothing over the last 4 years, perhaps the 6 years between 2015 and 2021. Hope for lots of merchandise to come out for us to enjoy, lots of new collectibles, and maybe some new video games to go along with it. I think we've got to look forward to what's coming up. We have to give it a chance, because if we shoot it down, then what's for casual fans to join them? And we need those casual fans to buy into Bond, to ensure that Bond survives for the next generation until it's handed over to the next lucky person. Obviously, after 100 years, copyright ceases and anybody can do it. So, you know, we've got 38 years now or so, or 37 years now, until that happens. And we've got to enjoy every moment of it and hope that Amazon do it justice. And fingers crossed they will. And hopefully they'll take time and learn from the mistakes of the likes of Disney with other big franchises, and they can hopefully make a success of it. So, I've seen the negatives. I do see why people are very negative about it. I'm very apprehensive about it, nervous about it, but at least something is happening, and that is the way I'm looking at it. And fingers crossed, we'll get a Bond that we're proud of, and we'll get the content that we've been waiting for, whether that be films every 2 years, or maybe some other different things to keep us ticking along in the meantime between the main installments. That is what I'm looking for, and what I'm looking forward to, hopefully coming from this change of creative direction. So, that's my ideas. That's my reaction to it. There might be a follow-up video to this if I learn more, if I find or have inspiration of what more could happen. Do let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. And obviously, let's try and be positive about it. We thank Barbara, we thank Michael for what they did over the last 30 years. They have kept Bond going when it didn't look possible. And now we have to hope that Amazon do exactly the same thing. If you have enjoyed it, give it a big thumbs up down below. Subscribe for plenty more Bond content. And I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. Thanks for watching. And goodbye, Mr. Bond.